The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Thank you so much for downloading this episode of So What Do You Really Do? The podcast where I, your host, Deader Dennis Malice, speaks with artists and entertainers about their day jobs. And this conversation is the day job of all day jobs for this podcast. I was lucky enough to sit down finally after a lot of rescheduling and talks and back and forth and emails. Got to sit down with magician, comedian, and professor of comedy studies at Emerson College, Mike Bent. It was a great, fun conversation. I'm really glad we finally got to do this because I wanted to know what goes into the first ever college level comedy class. Not even class, major. Like you can major in comedy now at Emerson. They've been doing it for about 2 years, I think it was. He says in the podcast, I want to know, who are the students that take that? What are the kids learning? What are they trying to teach the kids when it comes to comedy and how they're doing it? He goes in depth on what the courses do and how he gets their mindsets into comedy. And of course, we go into his background as a magician and comedian, someone who performs at the Mystery Lounge at the Comedy Studio every Monday or so, and how he actually adapted his comedy and magic routine to be for children. Because that's mainly what he does, is he does a children's show, a magic and comedy children's show. And I want to know what it goes into that, because I'm a fan of magic. I have been since a small child. And I would love to go see his shows, but it's weird sitting there being the only adult watching a magic show full of children. So that's essentially everything that we talked about. And then some more, and there's some really good stories of him when he started out. So it's a very interesting conversation that I had, and I hope that you will enjoy it with magician, comedian, and teacher Mike Bent.
This is a great setup you have here.
It is nice. It's mostly, it's 90% of it is just stuff I acquired from working in radio for 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other 10% I spent a fair amount of money on to just for whatever reason. Like this arm here literally came from one of the studios I used to work at in Baltimore.
Oh, wow.
So,
do you think I could write on just...
oh, yeah, if you were like a...
yeah, actually, no. Yeah, I can just grab a piece of paper here.
Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, that's great.
Help yourself.
Now, just in case I forget something or think of something.
Yeah, I had I spent most of the morning just making sure to clean the place up a little bit, just because Zach had a Super Bowl party. And so I didn't want anything to smell like old chili or stale beer.
Yeah.
Because I went to another party somewhere else.
Yeah.
So that was where my fun was. Most of my fun was spent at a friend's house going, God, I hope I don't have to come home to too much of a mess.
It's a great idea for a podcast.
Yeah, thank you. It's I've worked in radio up until August for 15 years. So when I came up with the concept of this, I was like, I have an interesting day job. Other people have interesting day jobs that do this. People should know that we have these careers outside during the day, and we do whatever we do at night, which is what we really want to do. And it's just a mode to get to know who the guest is as a person.
Yeah, no, it's great.
Instead of just having the typical, like, so when did you start doing that kind of stuff.
Did is radio started doing the same thing like newspapers did, where it's basically like all the local stuff they're just like getting rid of, and they're just replacing it with service, like, subscription stuff and whatever. It just seems like they're...
I don't know what newspapers have been doing, but I can tell you...
That's what newspapers are doing. Like, the Herald is like, there's like a bare bone staff for the Herald. It's mostly like...
I mean, I could say that radio is probably doing similar because they're cutting back and trying to get as much for their bang as they can. But I worked in the FM side of things, and now I'm finding I'm starting to dabble in the non-commercial side of radio.
Nice.
And two completely different worlds.
Yeah.
Very much different.
Have you ever thought of, like, producing, like, comedy bits that, like... Because I know a lot of, like, stations subscribe to, like you write a parody song about based on something that came up, like, the day before.
Yeah, and there's, I think, what's his name? Big Fluffy? I think he had one of those services too called Carmen Calls.
Yeah.
They're just fake calls, and he plays a character. I think it's him. It sounds like him. I can't find out who actually does Carmen Calls because we even had the service.
Yeah.
And we couldn't find out who the original person was at one of the stations I worked at. But I don't know. I got laid off in August, and now where I'm at is just trying to figure out what, stay afloat is basically what I'm doing right now. Yeah. So yeah, that's just the windscreen. The mic's behind it. But yeah, if you talk into it, it'll pretty much pick you up no matter what.
Great.
But, I've never thought of it. I've done the voices on demand stuff before.
Yeah.
Where you call in, look, hey, I'm pretending to be a caller, calling to talk on the topic that you want to talk,
Right.
or War of the Roses or stuff like that, where it's like, oh, we're gonna send roses to this guy and see who he sent it to, his girlfriend or his wife, and then it's gonna be hilarious. I hate those.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I can't idly sit by and watch or listen to fake radio, so I don't want to participate in fake radio.
Right. You had done one of my you had been on one of the shows that I did at the studio with my students. Is that right?
I don't think I was on any of the ones you did with your students. I've been around and hung around.
But I thought maybe you were on one of those shows, one of those Emerson shows, but I could be wrong.
No, and that's great that what your students get to do their final performance at a real club in front of a real audience, whereas like Improv Boston, it's mostly friends and family.
Right.
But at the studio, anybody can just walk in at any time, and they have an audience that comes regularly, and it's much more beneficial, I think, for your students to perform in front of real people who have nothing at stake for them to perform at. Actually, you know what? Now I think about it, I did do one of your student showcases.
I thought you did, yeah. I thought you did.
The reason I blocked it out is because I brought a date that night, and it did not go well. I haven't talked to her since, so I blocked it from my memory.
Sorry to bring that up. Yeah.
No, I do remember that now.
I thought that you had,
because I even remember having to think when I was talking, I was because I remember when there was a female student, I feel like she played the ukulele.
Oh yeah.
And she did very well. And there was a thought in my head because I went on somewhere after her, and I was like, oh man, how embarrassing is it going to be if I brought a date and then I bomb, and the kid who's going to comedy school does better than me, and that's exactly what happened. Basically.
Yeah.
I didn't do that bad that night, but it wasn't a stellar performance. When you're bringing someone to go, no, I am a comedian.
That's always awkward and horrible.
Yeah, I didn't mean to, but she kept pressing the issue, and I was like, all right, fine.
My wife, I think it was about 6 months before I let her see me.
Okay.
And then it was like, what's your favorite joke? And it was like the most obscure thing. I'm going like, all right, you're a keeper. It's like the thing that didn't work was your favorite. That's good.
If you like the thing that didn't work, then you're the gal for me.
Exactly, yeah.
On that, the number one question, especially now, because I'm much more vocal about being a comedian, because I have to get every butt into a seat. Yeah, sure.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
okay.
This is the way,
Okay.
I like the non-discreet start.
Yeah.
Where it makes, because we're already talking.
Right, yeah.
And so you don't feel, you're a professional. Some people I bring in here have never done an interview whatsoever, so I have to kind of trick them into going, oh, this is how I'm supposed to talk. Is normal and what, because I used to do music interviews in college, and I'd bring in local bands, and they're great, and they're fun, and they're partying and everything, and joking around, and as soon as the mics crack, I was like, hey, I'm here with Misdirected. Why don't you boys go ahead and say hi and introduce yourselves, and then just, hello.
Yeah.
Like they now become scared, but as long as you're acclimated and already in. Since I've been doing it, since I always get this question, and I'm sure it's a different answer for you, is people always want to know when they find out you're a comedian, where do you perform? And I feel like that question comes from, I don't know that people do comedy, or where can I go see comedy? For you as a kids magician and comedian, how do you answer that question when somebody asks, where do you usually perform?
It's funny. I like the fact that we do the show, The Mystery Lounge, which is at the Comedy Studio on Monday nights. So I can always easily direct people there. we do the Mystery Lounge, you can go there. And it's sort of like, that's like my out, but it's sort of like, I'm very bad at explaining what I do to people. Like my barber, I hope he's not listening. Like my barber is just like, I just hope the question never comes up. Like he'll go like, are you off today? I'm like, yeah. And I'm kind of like, and I'll just sort of change the subject. I just don't want to, I think it's not interesting. I just think it's kind of, if you kind of have to give like the big answer. So I'm always like kind of reluctant about it. So I'm always glad to be able to spin it like, oh, you can go here, just an easy, quick thing. But like for me, it's like very complicated because it's like I do a lot of different kinds of shows, and And most of them, they can't come and see me because it's like I'm in a school or I'm at a library or something. And it's sort of, like, yeah, I'm not going to tell somebody, yeah, come see me with 800 kids about this. But, it's just it's sort of awkward. So,
well, somebody told me recently, there's a lot of stories that people have told me about you that I'm going to ask you to confirm or deny today. And one of them is, I know you have played at the White House in past years.
10 times.
You refuse to do it. You've been asked and you're refusing to do it now, if I understand that?
I wasn't asked, but I didn't push it. Okay. I could have done it if I wanted to, but I didn't pursue it.
And it's because of the current political climate, which we don't have to go into.
Yeah, no. It's just sort of like, I did it 10 times. I did it 2 times for President Bush, all 8 years of Obama. I was the only magician to do it all 8 years. Actually opened for Obama. And opened for the First Lady, which is like amazing, like literally like warmed up the kids, got them ready, and then go, here's the president, So it's just like, and I figured I don't want to push my luck. I had really good experiences. I don't want to do it. And from what I've seen, like the first year they did the egg roll, it was really scaled back. And when I did it under George Bush, it was about 3,000 people over the course of the day.
Wow.
The Obamas opened it up to 35,000 people.
Oh my God!
Over the course of the day.
That's like the population of a city.
Yes, it's like 6 groups of and so you're working all day. But it was like they made it a lottery system where you just kind of go and get tickets online, and anybody goes. So what was cool when I did it originally, it seemed kind of privileged. People who were like friends of friends, and and this was just regular people, which made it a lot more fun and easier. And I know that they've scaled the numbers back, and they've scaled I don't think they had any performers really that I've heard of doing it the last 2 years. So I was like, I had a good run. I'm happy with it. I'm like, all right, I can just kind of rest on that.
Mm-hmm.
I got to bring my wife and my daughter down, to the White House. It's just like, that's really cool. It's just sort of, yeah.
And you start. I don't think there's a single person who started magic as an adult. Everyone starts somehow as a kid. They get into it.
Yeah.
When you're doing it for that many, even shows now, how many times do you see the spark of inspiration in the kid, and you when you're performing, go, oh, that's he's going to be me in 30 years.
It's the best hobby you can push on a kid. It makes you. I was a very, 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 very shy kid, very, very introverted, and it's the only hobby that forces you. I can't just do this card trick in my room. You have to do it for someone to work. So it's the thing that actually kind of forced me to interact with other kids and do things. So
how old were you when you started?
I got a magic set when I was 6, and I never stopped. Like I literally, every year I got a magic set and magic books, and I lived at the library. I grew up in Somerville. The Somerville Library had great books. I just lived there, and it was like I have them all memorized. I can all those kids' books on magic. I know them by heart. So I just kind of always did it, and but it was definitely the thing that forced me to be a performer was that. You just can't do this by itself. Yeah,
music you can kind of play and perfect and just only play for yourself in your room and become a virtuoso and never actually have to play for anyone else.
Yeah.
Magic and comedy, is really, they don't exist in a vacuum.
Right, exactly. It's to me, magic and comedy are like really the same thing. It's all the same basic rules apply. It's pretty much they're closer than I think most people think. It's all about leading the audience to one path. When you kind of switch it up, it's just all the same basic rules apply.
Now, when did you start becoming a performer, a magician for hire? Like, when did you start going, hey, I'll come to your son's party?
Yeah, My first show that I remember doing was in middle school, probably 7th grade. And I went to Southern Junior High in Somerville, and I had a friend there who also kind of did magic, and we kind of hung around. And he said, hey, my church group wants to hire you to do a show. So I'm like, all right, great. So I was like getting like $10 or something, and I I don't know, like 20
seventh grade,
minutes.
$10 is
everything.
No,
it was phenomenal. And it was, I did like 20 minutes and it was all like, it was like magic kit stuff, like, look, I open the box and it's gone and it's there, it's just real basic stuff.
The vase the desert vase where it just keeps pouring.
Just real, nothing other than magic, magic kit stuff. And when I finished, the guy who was in charge of their youth group said, all right, you can have a seat, sit over here. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. But then they had a visiting preacher who just talked about how evil I was for about an hour. And that I was in league with the devil. What I was doing was real. I was harnessing the dark arts. And it was just like, and I was thinking, I must have been really good if I fooled them that much that they really thought I was like using Satan to make a handkerchief disappear, And it like, I think most people it would have like scared them off, but I was kind of like, wow, that was kind of cool actually. Like I liked the fact that I kind of annoyed the guy. So, like around that time, like I'm a kid, I love magic, desperately wanting to do it. And around that time, like there were a lot of comedy acts that came out that were very, very similar. So you had like Steve Martin and Andy Kaufman and all these, and turns out Steve Martin and Andy Kaufman both did magic.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like, it's not a big accident. So, it was kind of cool to see like, you don't have to be Jerry Seinfeld. You can do this other kind of stuff. And I was really lucky that the timing worked out, that at that time there was sort of that explosion and it looked accessible to me. Like I could see a path, I could see like a pathway to take. And then I moved from Somerville to Belmont, to start high school. And then when I was in high school, I started performing in the theater program. And just, I could do Steve Martin's album somebody would say, do it. I could just do it.
Yeah.
I could do it word for word.
I was the same way with Dennis Leary's No Cure for Cancer.
Yeah. Exactly. I just knew every single beat of it. And then I was about 16. I had been doing like shows, but nothing. I think the first thing I did that was any kind of regular thing was I worked in a restaurant doing like table magic. I was probably about 16 then when I started doing that. And you just like, it was like a Tuesday nights, you'd go up and, hey, do you want to see some magic? And you'd kind of do some magic and kind of move on and do that. And I ended up doing that for about 14 years at the same restaurants, which was like a really long time. But that's when I started going to, my first stand-up thing ever was the Ding Ho.
Yeah, legendary Boston comedy club, the Ding Ho.
I had never been in a comedy club in my life. I had only seen it on TV and really I'd never been in a nightclub in my life.
And this is what year? Like 1981?
That must have been like 1979 or something like that.
Okay.
So it's like, yeah, so I...
Right in the heyday of comedy.
Oh, yeah, that's when it all like was starting up. And Lenny Clark was the MC. He he had a great intro for me, so he liked having me on because he could use the intro. He's like the kind of magician that he pulls a rabbit out of a hat, but then he cuts it in half with a chainsaw. So it's like, here he is, Mike Bent. So he loved doing that joke, so I think he just put me on because he could do the joke, because the joke always killed. Barry Crimmins at that time was sort of running the Ding Ho. He was running the Ding Ho. He was very, very critical about what I was doing because I was doing like all old gags, and that's the problem with magic is like you can buy an act, you can just sort of you pick up all this stuff. So I was like, I didn't know any better. I was just like, yeah, that's how you do it. That's how I learned. And very, very early on was like, no, you have to be original. You have to write your own jokes. You have to. So it kind of like put the fear of God in me in really quick. So I basically, kind of over the course of like maybe 6 months, kind of dropped everything and then just sort of picked up doing my own thing, and it worked out pretty well. Now,
were you ever doing stand-up, or was it always a mix of magic and comedy?
It's always been a mix of magic and comedy, yeah. Okay. I mean, I've gone on stage, I've done character things, but even with the character things, I do some magic in it. I never wanted to do just regular stand-up. I've always thought of myself as a magician first, who does stand up. So it was just sort of like, I always liked doing the weird stuff. I was like for a long time, it kind of everything kind of morphed into like special effects kind of stuff. Like I would do a bit where I would say, this is a Jack in the Box inspired by the movie Alien. And it would be this black biomechanical Jack in the Box. And it would start playing Pup Goes the Weasel, and I'd be playing it, and it wouldn't work, and I'd go, oh, safety catch, and I'd hit it, and then it wouldn't work again. I'd be like, oh, there's something wrong with it. I don't know. And then the alien would burst out of my chest. So it's sort of like, so it's basically, it is a magic trick. It has all the beats of a magic trick, but it also has all the beats of a joke. It's sort of like a weird hybrid kind of thing. So Stephen Wright one time he said, you're doing what I do, but you're proving it. And I went, oh, that's kind of cool, actually. I never thought about it. You're living in this weird, surreal world, but you actually prove it. You actually give evidence for it, where I just kind of say it. You actually go and do it.
Yeah, one of my favorite Stephen Wright jokes is I like to mess with the kid across the street. So one night when his parents left, I built my whole house out of balsa wood, and I would pick it up. I'm not doing the joke justice, but basically he had a joke about building his house out of balsa wood so he can mess with the kid across the street, and you just pick his house up and frighten their child.
Yeah. And that's the kind of thing that I would actually do.
Yes.
Like, it was just sort of like, so he was like an early person that really, because I'm sure you've experienced the whole, like, props are bad, music is bad, anything different is bad kind of a thing, which isn't as big a thing now. It was a big thing.
Yeah, I've never been that guy.
Because
I started, with a magic kit at 8 or whatever.
But like when I started, that was like a big, you had to, work extra hard to kind of get them to like it. And Stephen was one of the first. Stephen and Jonathan Katz were like the two people that really kind of like went to other people. No, you should listen to him. You should see this guy. And just forget all that stuff. Look what he's doing. And they were like my big cheerleaders, and they really helped me an awful lot.
Second story for your confirmation. I heard from somebody that you were doing a road gig one time. You had to pick up the headliner.
Yeah. Okay.
Good. You already know.
Yeah.
I would love to hear the story from your perspective.
Sure. Well, this is exactly what we were just talking about. Like, it was, one thing that was really nice was having a car, because then it increased your gig potential. Because like in those days, there were 1 million satellite rooms. People don't realize like how many there were, but there were like satellite rooms, comedy rooms that might do once a week outside of Boston. Within like an hour and a half of Boston, there were probably like 70 or 80. It was like a huge number, and they were.
Yeah, you could just do shows in New England.
Oh yeah,
within a 2-3 hour or less.
It was crazy.
4 hour or less drive all of New England and make a living.
Yeah, easily, and it's like so. So having a car was great, and one time I was working some gig up in New Hampshire, and they said, "Can you pick up this guy?" And I didn't know him, and I pick him up. I had to drive into Boston to go to New Hampshire to pick him up. So it's like adding to my drive. I pick him up, and he gets in the car, and he says, "What's the suitcase for? We're not staying." And I said, "Oh, it's just like stuff for my act." He goes, "Oh, I hate prop comedians," and refused to talk to me. I'm driving him to a gig, like an hour, maybe an hour and a half away, doesn't talk to me. He's just like, all right, I just put on the radio and that's it, right? So we get to the show, and I think there was a local person that was opening. I was doing my middle spot, and then he was headlining. So I do my spot, everything's fine, do it. And he gets up, and the first thing out of his mouth is somebody else's joke. And then the second thing out of his mouth is somebody else's joke. So I asked the bartender, I said, can I get a piece of paper? And I actually footnote the first 20 minutes of his act. I mean, literally, like, that's Wendy Liebman, that's so-and-so, that's Margaret Smith, and I just footnote. I'm like, literally that, and then I just left it, and I said, when you can do this to me, we'll talk. And then I just signed it, I left it for him, and I just left him at the gig. I never said I'd take him home.
Yeah.
I never agreed to that. So I was pissed because it's like, I'm working my ass off to be 100% original, and you're giving me crap when you can't even write, you're just like ripping people off. So I was like really mad, and I just like, I'm a very calm person, and I was just like, yeah, no, I'm just gonna. But what was cool about that is everybody heard about it. And they heard that I stood up for myself. And that was another thing that really helped. Like, yeah, no, he's serious. He's not going to take shit from people. And that made a big difference. You know, that definitely helped. But yeah, that actually happened. Yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad it happened the way somebody told it.
Yeah.
Because there's a sweet vindication there that.
Yeah, no, it's.
I watch people do. I watch magicians who do who buy the trick.
Yeah.
And do the story of the trick the way it's written.
Exactly. Yeah.
Look, if you're going to do a rope trick, that's fine. Give me something new and interesting about it.
Right.
Or they'll do a really good trick, but then their jokes are really terrible or hacky, and it's just.
Yeah, I actually
just uncomfortable for me as a performer to watch.
I lecture for magicians on being original. That's like my number one lecture is, being your own person on stage. And I did a huge convention. It's called Magic Live. It's one of the biggest conventions in the world. And I'm doing this big lecture. And the whole lecture is about originality. And I took a trick that everybody does, which was, it's a great trick. It's like a real common plot of magic. You borrow a dollar bill from somebody. They sign their name on it. You burn it up. It ends up inside a lemon. It's like, that's a really cool trick, right? So there's no reason people shouldn't do that trick. It's like a classic. But everybody does the same jokes, So I took like one little part of the thing was like, okay, they sign their name on the bill. And I just said to the audience, what are the go-to lines? And they go, oh, you got to put your Social Security on there too. And that's a federal offense. If it's the opposite sex, you say, write your phone number too, and it's just like, and I just like, none of those are funny.
Yeah.
Like, or they're just sort of placeholder jokes. It's just like, they don't really do anything. They're like
clever.
It's just noise. They're clever, but they're just noise, and it's like, you didn't think of them. It's just, and I said, well, what if you just didn't, sorry, let me just take 5 minutes to figure out like what I can do with that. So I was in the car with my daughter, and I went through the whole process in the lecture. I said, why do you have to say anything? Here, sign your name in the bill. Man, I could say something else, like, talk to somebody in the audience, whatever, or just say nothing. And I thought, well, if I'm saying nothing, what do I do? And I'm like, all right, I could kind of look over their shoulder and kind of be Snoopy, right? And I thought, well, that's kind of funny. And I was thinking I could comment on their handwriting. I could make a joke about their handwriting. Then I said, what if I'm just like, I invade their personal space and get a little too close? And I thought, kind of like that, because it's kind of, you're trying to do this thing and I'm being Snoopy. And then I said, well, what if I said, oh, I couldn't help but notice your perfume. What is it? And maybe I could riff off whatever perfume she said. But then I thought it was funnier to say, well, I couldn't help but notice you noticing my cologne, which is like, they're not, but it's sort of like, it's kind of a pretentious thing to say. So then I was thinking, well, what would my cologne be? And I'm like, all right. And I came up with this gag, which is, it's called Ocean Mist. Do you like it? And they go, yeah, they're 3 for $5. You get them at the car wash. And I'd take out a chain with a air freshener tree around my chest. And then it's just like, yeah, that's a pretty good joke. Because it's like, he's an idiot and he's cheap and all that. So it's kind of like, I did the lecture, it took 5 minutes to come up with like a better bit.
Yeah. I mean, you can not even sign your name. Write down your favorite song.
Yeah, exactly. Something.
Anything
exactly.
else.
Exactly. Anything else but that. So I did the lecture. I get off. It's like, goes really well. I'm really psyched. And I had like 15 people go, did you sell that little tree thing with the, and I'm going, oh man, you didn't get it, And then, but then I was like thinking, well, anybody could do that joke. And it's kind of like, yeah, maybe it's not good enough joke. If they all think they could do it and get away with it, maybe it's kind of lame. So then I like put it aside, and then later on I was rethinking it, and here's what I do now. I go, do you like it? Oh, it's called Ocean Mist. They're 3 for $5, and I take the thing out, and I show it, gets the laugh, and I go, yeah, the only thing is I have this horrible tree-shaped rash, and when I open up my shirt, there's a blistering tree-shaped pussy rash, perfectly tree-shaped, and it's like, and that kills, and it's like, and they can't do that.
Yeah.
Because it's like, my character can do that. They can't do it. So it's sort of like, it kind of forced me to even think, go a little bit further with it. But it's just like, most magicians won't put in the 5 minutes that it takes to just like ask a couple of questions and think about what you're doing. And it drives me crazy.
Or just create a point of view.
Yeah.
Of who you are.
A character, your point of view. Absolutely. You're totally right. That's like, and, but so many won't do it. And there's, and again, there's so many like, so many bad comedy magicians that do it, but there's also so many bad comedians that do it. So it's sort of like the numbers are probably pretty even. They're probably I don't think it's proportionately different for magicians. I just think you notice them more because they're different. They stand out a little bit. But
and so now you're. At what point do you go from being a road comedian magician to teaching at Emerson? You graduated from Emerson.
Yeah, I graduated from Emerson. I started teaching. This is actually, this fall was my 31st year starting working at Emerson. So I started when I was pretty much right out of there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I've been there a long time. When I got the gig, Ron Lynch, do you know Ron?
Ron Lynch.
Ron Lynch is a legendary Boston comic. Name
sounds familiar, but I'm not picturing him. I probably know exactly who it is. But
he's really big in the LA kind of alternative scene. He has a show called The Tomorrow Show that's really just a phenomenal, thing. And he's always been one of my favorite comedians. He's just weird and brilliant and great. And he recommended me for it. And I was like floored because I'm like going, wow, if I will do whatever he says I should do because I really respect him. And I did it. And when I started doing it, it was just a general like kind of writing class. And over the years, I changed it. I added a sketch comedy class where you actually, basically the class is a comedy troupe and you write the sketches and do the sketches at the end of the semester. We do like 14 sketches at the end of the semester. Then I added the stand-up class where, again, people do their thing and all that. So it really has now Emerson's the only college we're in the world where you can major in comedy studies,
which you're the head of now. Right?
I'm not the head of it. I'm on the committee for it, but I'm like I'm one of the people that kind of oversees the major and kind of helps develop it and works on it. So and it's very popular. It's like
yeah, I mean,
we thought with the numbers of people that applied, we're like, oh my God, no one thought it would be that many, and they had to like double the program basically like the first year, which was insane. So the last couple of years, I've been really busy because I've been taking on more courses, and it's just sort of like it's been very, very tough schedule wise. So honestly, I just kind of fell into it. It was just like, Ron recommended. I never thought of doing it. Ron recommended me, and it worked out pretty well. And I think one reason why it works is like what I do is so nichey. I'm not really competing with them. If somebody was doing the same kind of stand-up jokes that I was doing, I'd be kind of like, it would be kind of hard to do, I think. But I'm like, no one even does anything close to what I'm doing. Yeah. So I can kind of give them like my full attention with their stuff, and it works out pretty well. I really like doing it. What happened around the same time of that happening was the comedy boom kind of went bust. I took this as like a part-time thing. I thought, yeah, I'll do it because Ron recommended it. And then within a year or two.
This is what, like 85, 86?
Yeah. So like 80, 88 in that ballpark. So basically the comedy boom, like in 90 went bust. That was like the big year of it. Just like literally, my work just, all the rooms just closed. It's like overnight. It was just like gone. That's how it seems anyway. I'm sure there were signs there that I didn't see coming, but that's what it felt like. And basically I went, yeah, a good thing I have this and I could kind of do it. So that was when I kind of didn't want to go on the road. I did road stuff. Most of my road stuff was colleges, which I really liked doing because it's just like, you go out for 2 weeks and you're gone and then you kind of back. But I was like, in 1990, I got married. I didn't want to be on the road. I didn't, in 1992, I had my daughter. I didn't want to be on the road. So it's sort of like I kind of picked up doing other things. And then that's when my daughter was about 3 or 4, I was going, my favorite thing in the world is making her laugh. I will do anything I can to make her laugh. And I had done magic for kids before, but never really, I always just thought of like, it was like an extra thing. I kind of do it. But then I went, oh, I can do the same thing. I could do basically stand up for kids and call it magic, but so basically I just sort of picked up on doing that. And it's like, it's just turns out I was pretty good at it, and it just it's a blast. So it's sort of it lets me work during the day, so I'm home at nights. I get to see everybody. I had a normal schedule, didn't have to be on the road. So I lucked out. Like between Emerson and that, it just gave me the stability that I needed to, to make it work. I was totally lucky. Like the timing of everything just all worked for me. I'm very grateful of that.
So as a man who teaches comedy writing and sketch comedy, what is the basic, and I'll say syllabus, but when you're creating a class specifically about comedy writing, what are the topics that you're going through with the students to get them to understand that, I always say comedy's formula, setup plus punchline equals laugh.
Yep.
Put it, multiply it by a tag, and you get more laughs.
Yeah.
People say that, like, oh, comedy is formula, but you could break the formula. Like, no, you can't break the formula. It's very formulaic. If you stick to it, it'll work every single time. So what is it that you teach them in a writing class? Just general
it's funny.
Makes it different than a regular writing class.
It's funny because you mentioned that. The first class, I usually make this big chart on the board, like a graph, and it's set up over punchline, and it's like, they think, oh my God, it's going to be like, we need notebooks, we need to write in. And I'm like, no, this is just nothing, It's more like, sketch is more, how can you come up with ideas? And the first month or so is just brainstorming. And I came up with these like little techniques over the years that kind of like let you come up with just really great original premises and stuff pretty quickly. So I just kind of like work that, show them that you can sit around and wait for an idea to come to you, or you can make the idea happen. So, like, we do one thing where it's like at the end of the class, I have like 15 students. They probably come up with like 3 things. I come up with a bunch. We could probably come up with like 50 viable sketch ideas. Out of those 50 viable sketch ideas, 5 are like really, really good. Like, you could do that and we could write that and it's going to play out and we can just do it. So it's kind of like, that's not bad for an hour's work, like an hour and a half of work. It's coming up with like 5 really good ideas. So it's more a question of getting them to have confidence in their ideas. Like, yeah, this can work. We can fix it. Just, we bring it to the table. You're going to get a lot of input. We'll fix it. And, so it's more building their confidence and just showing them how to come up with the ideas. Then the second half of the semester, they write the sketches, and then we really fine tune them. That's it. Like my favorite thing in the world with magic and comedy and everything is crafting. Like when you have something that kind of works, but then you make it like work. And you, like you said, you multiply the tags, you come up with all the bits, you come up with the great ending. It's like, that's my favorite part of the whole deal, more than performing. That's like my favorite part, is just like that craft, so it's like just the fact that we get to work on that and improve it every time, and they get to just live out the process, and then we actually do the show, and the sketches work, and they're like, wow, okay, that's amazing,
So it's more an interactive class than it is lectures.
Oh yeah, it's not lecture at all. It's just like, I run every class like a writer's room. It's just like, yep, we're just, what do you have? And the stand-up one is it's a little bit different because they're not working on a group thing. They're working on their own things. So it's kind of get them to come up with like topics that are interesting, and a lot of that real introspective stuff. I always say that you get in comedy, your weaknesses are your strengths. And a lot of people don't want to reveal their weaknesses. So it's kind of like, well, we kind of have to do that. Yeah. So it's sort of like, what are the things you're afraid of? What are your phobias? What are your anxieties? Just kind of like go through all that and go, yeah, that's the kind of stuff we should be talking. So it's more like kind of getting them to come out of like a safety zone and think about like, I need to talk about how messed up I am and that kind of thing, and that is hard to do. That takes a little bit of time, but then once they get there, then they can have fun with it, like even you mentioned the show that there was the woman that had the ukulele. Like, she only reluctantly towards the end of the semester said, kind of came up afterwards and said, I played the ukulele and I kind of thought about this thing, but I think it's kind of lame. And she did it, and I was like blown away by it. It was like, no, that's the kind of, that's what you should be doing. That's like better than anything you did for the other stuff. So it's just sort of like kind of getting them to trust themselves and have it be having it be a really supportive but not Pollyanna, environment. Yeah, that's kind of the key to it. Is just like kind of just being able to work with them. And I've done it, for a long time. So now it's like kind of like I think I know how to do it. But the early days of that was just like trying to figure it out. Was like, okay, let's try this, and you just keep the stuff that that tries, that works.
Now, both sketch in the stand-up class where you're working with people, coming up with ideas, pitching ideas, going, all right, what's a good thing here? What are you thinking about? Do you notice a trend every year of certain topics always come up and you're like,
yeah, that's
been treaded on? Or,
yeah,
hey, maybe you can come somewhere new. Like, what topics do these kids come up with?
Well, it's funny because like escape rooms are a big thing now, like the escape room sketch. And it's like, it's a great premise for a sketch, and it's like, basically what I like about it is you have the beginning, middle, and end all there. We're locked in the room, you get the rules, you do the clues, and you either get out or you don't. So it's like, boom, that's easy. That's all right. We can just put jokes in there. That's fun. It's, so that's sort of a common one now. But even like when my stand-up one, I always write a list on the board. It's like airplane food, dogs versus cats. I write that and I go, what is this? And they go, hack set list. I go, no, it's not. You could do any of those. Nothing's been done.
Yeah.
Nothing's finished. If you have an interesting take on dogs and cats, you should do it. Don't think these work. These are good topics. And it's the fact that I think the lamest thing comedians say is everything's been done. It's just like, that's a lie. It's like, no, it's like, why would you do it? If everything had been done, why would you still do it? I would have no interest. If I honestly believe that, I would have no interest in doing this because I'm just retreading ground. It's like, no, like everyone has a unique perspective. You can always bring new things to it.
And that's the challenge is to bring something unique to a topic that has already been treaded on. Where can you find your individual voice?
Yeah, and then if you do the airplane food joke that's brilliant, then everybody goes, "Oh my God, that joke's just been sitting there for the taking, and you were the one that came along and took it." It's just like everyone worked on that, but you got the joke. It's like I think people actually have respect for you when you do old like what are considered common topics and create new ground with it. And that's like, so even like if they bring up like something that's like a kind of a common sketch, it's like, I just look for the different angle on it. Like go, well, here's what's been done. And you go like, and I'll show, and what's great now is like, I can just pull up on YouTube.
Yeah.
Like I have a pretty encyclopedic knowledge of like sketches and everything. So I can just like Google it and go, yeah, Kids in the Hall did this. SNL did this with this. What can you do? And then they kind of look at it and they go, oh, okay. It's either the joke's been kind of done, I want to move on, or maybe I can come up with a new angle on it. So yeah, coming up with a new angle is always good.
Do you still watch SNL?
Yeah.
Do you watch it live or do you watch it like YouTube?
I usually DVR'd and watch it. Yeah.
And do you tell your students that they should, part of their homework is to go out and watch SNL regularly or watch old bits or watch old Kids in the Hall?
Yeah, the hardest thing is getting people to look at old stuff.
Yeah.
That's the only obstacle that I have. And old is like 5 years old. It's like, I'm trying to get them to look at Buster Keaton, and it's like, it's like they won't look at like a show that's like 5 years old. So like, so you kind of have to find like the great introductory. Here's like, how many of you know the Kids in the Hall? Like maybe you look one person, and then you show them like the skit, and they're like, oh my God, tell me more, and then they want to, it's almost like you have to find like the perfect thing. You can't force feed it. You got to have to find like the perfect examples that make them like want to find out more, want to dig a little bit deeper with it. Yeah, they're very like, they tend to be now very just like, nope, right now, that's what I'm dealing with. I don't want to look at the past. And I mean, I'm like a junkie for old stuff. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, I like, that's 99% of what I watch is all old, old shows and old TV stuff and all that. Yeah.
Holy Grail just came to Netflix earlier this month.
Oh yeah.
Or
And all the Python stuff is on Netflix now, which is great.
They've been slowly adding everything.
Yeah.
And then at the beginning of this year, they added Holy Grail. I was like, I
Yeah.
haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah.
And I sat down and watched it, and it's brilliant.
It's
Still brilliant.
So,
it's so well
yeah.
crafted. Even when you look
Yeah.
at the filmmaking aspect of it, like these guys who didn't really know what they were doing,
And they had
made
no
a
money.
film. Yeah.
They wanted horses. They couldn't afford horses, so
they found a way around
they
it.
came up with this brilliant workaround.
The Black Knight scene is literally Terry Gilliam and John Cleese fighting each other because they had no money or no idea for a stunt doubles.
Right. So it's like basically we'll do it this way and it'll work. And one show that I just kind of showed, which was like a revelation. Last semester I filled in. I had to teach a late night class, which isn't really my thing, but I think I did okay with it. I showed them. Did you ever see a show? It was called Fernwood Tonight with Martin Mull and Fred Willard, and then it became America Tonight. It was basically a fake talk show from Fernwood, Ohio. Martin Mull, Fred Willard, mostly like improvised, and they just had all these like stable of actors that they come in. It was just a completely fake talk show. And I'm going, you could do this now. This is the kind of thing that would work. It didn't work that well then. This would totally work now. Improv is such a big thing now. Like you could do this in a heartbeat and it costs you nothing to do. And like you could, so it's sort of like kind of find things that are old that are relevant now.
And do it.
Yeah. And then do it. Yeah.
How do you in your class? We both know sometimes comedy can be very. I don't want to use the word offensive because I hate saying that it's offensive because that means it's purposely done that way. But comedy can offend. Some people like to do dirty material. How do you handle that in a class? Do you give them free rein to talk about whatever they want? They're like, hey, look, because we are an institute, I have to put a kibosh on any genitalia joke or any dick jokes, or do they just get to do whatever?
It's pretty open. They still have to follow the rules that are in the school at large. So, but they're encouraged to really push the envelope. I mean, that's like the big thing now is like, colleges are too PC and all that stuff. It's just like, it isn't like colleges are it's like that generation is driving that though. Like that's what they want. Like they don't, and I think PC comes off as people are telling me I can't do stuff. And I think it's no, comedy is like, I think PC is just saying, do comedy that's relevant to now. A lot of times you hear like comedians kind of go, oh, I can't because PC, I can't do the same. But it's like, yeah, listen, like maybe like that joke you wrote 30 years ago, maybe it doesn't work anymore. Maybe things are different. Like, I've, by my own just going, I want to be relevant, have cut things that just, it has a different meaning now than it did even 5 years ago. It's just sort of like, that comes off a little this now, and I don't want to come off that way, so I don't need the joke, and I'll write another joke, So it's, like language, they can swear, they can do, it's no, it's funny because a lot of times they all try to shock me and I'm like, I'm kind of unshockable. Yeah. So it's sort of like, you do know who you're dealing with here, like the guy that had aliens burst out of his chest and chronic nosebleeds and I sucked my brain out of a machine and died on, just like, like I'm kind of done the shock thing. It's really only comes up as a problem when it's really mean-spirited, when it's kind of like you're punching down, you're making fun of, like, that's the only time when it really kind of comes up, is that. And then we kind of talk it through, and then people get to, like, I always say you have to find a balance between having an environment where you can be creative and an environment where people feel comfortable. So it's like, it's like we just kind of talk it through, and usually we can talk it out and it's fine. Sometimes it lingers, but not very often. It seems to kind of correct itself pretty well.
Now, do you wait until a student does something that is potentially triggering to somebody?
Usually.
To have that conversation, or do you?
We have it up front
Okay.
that if something really bothers you, you should speak up, and if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, talk to me about it and I will speak up for you, a lot of it just kind of comes up. I remember there was one sketch somebody wrote, and it was a really good sketch, but the women in it were just sort of like the authority figures, just like, and it's just like my first instinct was, why do the women have to be naggy? Women can be evil too. And then they went, oh yeah, and then it actually made the sketch 1,000 times better, having it kind of them all flip and become, the bad person in it, rather than just the person saying, you shouldn't do that, that's bad. It's sort of like, no, corrupt them. Like we can, we can do that. And it's sort of like, yeah, just kind of looking at it. And I can usually kind of pull out the things that I think are going to be problematic, and I'll bring it up. I usually will bring it up first, but I don't go with a laundry list saying you don't do this, you can't do that. It's just sort of like they kind of know. They know the drill, I think. And it's just sort of like, it's just, I have to make sure everybody's feels like they can go up with their stuff. And if they're going to feel marginalized, then I don't want to have that environment. I want, like my last stand-up class was probably the most diverse one that I had, and it was probably the best show that I had. And it was like everyone was encouraged to try to like talk about this, and like what are, I have somebody that's performing in drag. It's like, well, what questions do you have for them? Like what, and it just sort of like, it actually was, I thought it came out really well. I was very, very happy with it. It was like, everybody felt like they could do their own thing, and I didn't think anybody was holding back anything.
So over the 30 plus years that you've been teaching, have you noticed the demographic of the class shifting?
Yeah. When I first started, there would be maybe one or two women in the class. Now it's probably 50-50, if not more women than men. The major's pretty much split down the middle, and that's honestly just based on who applies and who gets in. It's not like we're trying to shape anything. It's just that's the way it works out. When I started, if the student was gay, they wouldn't really want to talk about it. Now it's like, yep, they want to talk about it. And I'm almost to the point of going, yeah, everyone knows the coming. Like that's kind of boring. Just do something different with it. It's become so commonplace that it's kind of like, yeah, you don't want to be defined by this necessarily. Do you want to be? You should talk about it, but it shouldn't be like your whole thing.
Do you want to be a comedian? Do you want to be a gay comedian?
Yeah, exactly.
Or a comedian
and a lot of it's
gay?
like, where do you want to work? Do you want to work mainstream clubs? Do you want to work gay clubs? Like, you can. Both are great, but you need to kind of start making decisions now about where you're going to go with that. So it's sort of like, all that stuff that people didn't want to talk. Like now they're talking about it, which is great. I mean, it's like it just makes it way more interesting, way more fun. And they're just more honest, it's like, but even, there's no, everybody's really supportive. There's never any blowback about things like, but where before it was like, yeah, probably 30 years ago, if you brought up you were gay, somebody would probably have a problem with it. It's just sort of like, no one cares now. It's like, and it's like, it's honestly, no one even, it doesn't even register with people. It's like, that's what's great about it. It's just sort of like, oh yeah, cool. Okay. It's not like a special thing or anything. It's just sort of like, yeah, but we're used to that.
Do you think
Emerson's always been like a very open, diverse school. So it's,
Do you think there's been something in the culture that has shifted, allowing more females who come to the class because we're telling them women can be comedians too? Or is it more of because we're in a comedy boom, so there's more people being inspired that just so happen to be female or gay or black or whatever?
Yeah, I think I always call it the Tina Fey factor because, Tina Fey just, rose as this like powerhouse. I mean, brilliant comedian, one of the best people SNL has ever had, like just great, And 30 Rock, here's a show that shouldn't have worked at all. Like, the network really didn't even want it to work. It was basically, there were 2 shows, Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
Which was Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah,
too,
and then 30
Aaron
Rock,
Sorkin
which is the
writing
same.
a comedy show? Wow.
Yeah, and then 30 Rock was supposed to fail, and it didn't. It completely dominated the landscape. And I think, and she wrote a great book that's very, like, honest and very, so I think a lot of that, I think she inspired a whole generation of people. And then Amy Poehler right behind her. But it's like, it's funny because the whole concept of, like, women aren't funny is just so ridiculous.
Such bullshit.
And it's like, it's a relatively new invention. It really kind of came out in the late 70s, early 80s, like when the comedy boom happened. It just kind of like, that's when it really kind of stuck. But before that, you go back to TV and vaudeville and stuff. It's like, no, they were
women.
The
all
biggest
over the place.
stars were women. Mae West, Fanny Bryce.
I mean, I'm only 37, but I grew up watching
and
Lucille Ball and thinking, I want to grow up to be Lucille Ball.
Carol Burnett is like the god of sketch comedy shows. It's like, so it's sort of like, it's, if you know the history of it, it's sort of like, it's such a ridiculous argument. And it's like, I don't know how it came about. I don't know how it happened. I'm glad that it's really kind of going away because it's just an artificial thing that just kind of popped up, when there was a boom and it kind of got attention, and it's just stupid. It's like, it's ignorant, know?
I don't know where it came from because as a kid, like I said, I wanted to be Lucille Ball when I grew up because I didn't see any difference between her and I growing up. But even as a kid, I'm not going to say I'm the most woke guy in the world because I'm definitely not. I've definitely done some bad misogynist things in my pastime just as a growing human being. But I've always, when somebody would go, oh, women aren't funny, I'm like, Joan Rivers, Carol Burnett.
Oh yeah, no,
I would list all these funny females for people, and they're like, yeah, but I'm like, no, but. I couldn't understand where that came from.
I never understood it because it's like everything that was in my experience was, I mean, like Mae West basically brought sex to the screen, like in comedy. She was the one. Yeah. She did it. She did it first, and she did it great. I mean, it was like amazing what she did with it.
Yeah, she did it 25 years before Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah, Carol Burnett invented the sitcom, basically. It's like, like she perfected it. She took like this fairly crappy medium at the time and just like made it beautiful and like, it's like somebody said that show's never not been on the air. Like it's always running somewhere in the world. Like literally since it was on, it's never been off the air.
At this moment, somewhere Lucy's
somebody's
watching
playing
her.
somewhere.
Yeah.
So it's just it's insane. It's just it's crazy. So I'm glad that like and again like kind of in my wheelhouse, I know all the I know the female comedian, so I can kind of like, you should look at this person, you should look at I know, like, I always appreciated funny people, and it's kind of like, I know all the funny people, and it's like, you can, I mean, Wendy Liebman is like one of the best setup punch tag writers ever in the history of the thing. It's just like, yeah, she's great. Like, like that's who I'm showing examples of in school.
I mean, her Lounge Lizard special from when I was a kid on Comedy Central, I watched it over and over and over as much. I watched that, her special as much as I watched Amazing Jonathan.
Yeah, she's one of the best writers that there is. I mean, hands down. Yeah, and consistently, consistently the whole career, just like
One of the things
it's just a crazy art. It's like people throw it around. It's just like you don't know what you're talking about. Like know your history.
One of the things that I've had, when I've had women on the show and women comedians that I'm friends with. A lot of them grew up not knowing of these women in comedy. So,
right. Yeah.
And they're like, look, I never heard of, Joan Rivers until I actually started doing comedy stuff.
Yeah.
Is that something that you feel that you've had similar experience with where your female students who are like, look, I want to do comedy, but I don't see any women on TV. And then you have to say, oh, well, do you feel like you've always said, hey, there's been role models out there. You just unfortunately haven't seen them?
Again, I try to bring up people that are relevant and kind of like, you should look at this person. You should look at this person, that kind of thing. I do kind of steer them to that. But right now the landscape in comedy is a lot better. I mean, it was like, you know, the Boston comedy scene in the beginning was not a very open place for women or people of color. It was just like, it just wasn't. And again, like, you had to be twice as funny to kind of like, you know, get the same as anybody else. And it's kind of like, you know, I always thought that I just like good comedy. So it was like, I always like hung out like with like Lauren Dombrowski. She was a brilliant stand-up comedian here. And then she went on to be a producer at Mad TV and actually had her nephew in my class. Like, she passed away a couple of years ago. Okay. I had her nephew in my, and I was just like, I almost cried because it was kind of like, I loved your mom. You know? Your mom was a genius. I mean, your aunt, I loved her. She was a genius, you know, like, just please let me, you know, like.
Have you taught multiple generations of comedians?
Not. That's like that was like okay. That was the one I'm going. Okay. I'm really old now. like okay, yeah, that was like, oh, geez, like it seems like yesterday, and it's like, yeah.
Moving on to doing, you know, when you decided to start doing more kids shows, what specifically makes for a good kids comedy show as opposed to adults?
There's really not that much difference. It's like, what I really like about it is that pretty much anything I think of, I have a use for. You know, if I think of something, it's kind of like, oh, I'll use it here, I can use it there, I can use it here, and I can kind of like plug it in anywhere. So, to me, the things about it that are important about doing a kid show is you don't ever speak down to kids. You don't treat them like they're stupid, you know. And that's like probably the number when I see other people, that's kind of what they do. Hello, boys and girls. Welcome. You know, it's just like all artificial and phony. And it's like, with my daughter, I never talked like baby talk to her. It was always just kind of like, hey, we're going to the mall, you know, we're going to shop. You know, she's like a baby. I'm like, just would talk to her like the way I talk to anybody. So just being like yourself with them. Kids really know if you're not sincere. You know, like they're like literally programmed to, it's like a defense thing, you know, like I need to know if this person is sincere or not. So they know if you're not having a good time. They know if you're not having fun. I take my cues from like Pixar, you know, I take my cues from like SpongeBob, like really good kids programming that doesn't, you know, in the show works for adults, it works for kids. There isn't anything in there that like doesn't work for everybody, you know. So like I have a Shining reference in the kid show. I make all the kids say red rum, you know. It's kind of like, yeah, okay, great. It works. They don't know what I'm talking about, but the adults do. I don't do a lot of that where it's at the expense of kids. You know, it's got to be fun for them. But it's just being honest with them, being fair with them, being just, again, it's like I do what I think is funny and it just happens to work. You know, like I do this thing where, my phone keeps going off during the show, like we just did on
Yeah, I know. The professional radio guy forgot to turn his phone off. It happens almost every intro I do at least once.
But it's funny because I remember just being at like a friend's house and somebody's phone went off and there was just that the buzz and all the kids like stopped because they knew they had to be quiet. And I'm like, oh, I can kind of use that. So there's a couple of points in the show where I need to bring them down. You know, I got them all excited. I kind of bring them down to, you know, kind of have a little bit of a flow to the show. And so I found this device where it's like my phone goes off and it's like, you know, and this bit on paper shouldn't work, but it does. And I have no understanding of it, but it does work. It's, I you know, it goes off and I go, hello. And everyone's quiet because they know like when the adult's on the phone, you need to be quiet. And
that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like, so you're talking like hundreds of kids, just whoop, totally quiet. And it's the old McDonald's Filet-O-Fish song, you know, like, give me back that filet. You know, like the thing on the wall, like it was like it was like the little Billy Bass and was saying, it was like this weird little Filet-O-Fish thing that was really funny at the time. It shouldn't work at all now because they have no reference to it, but it just works. It's just one of those things that just like oddly works. So it's like, okay, that's the first one. And the second one is And I kind of like, that was weird, like, what was that, And then I hang up. Then the second one is, I go, hello, and it's like, do you want to build a snowman? And I go, no, I don't want to build a snow. Stop calling. Why are you calling me? And it's like, okay, fine, and hang up. And the third one now is the Adele "Hello" song, So it's like hello, and the music comes up on me, hello, and it's like, and I'm like, yeah, it's me, it's me, and I'm like, yeah, I know, and it's like just me being annoyed, and it's like me blah 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 blah, and it's just me being annoying being annoyed by the Adele song, and it's just those things that like kill. But that's a comedy bit. That's not a
magic trick at all.
That's not a comedy bit. It's just like finding those.
It's a great running gag.
Yeah, and it's like I'm bratty in it. I'm condescending to Elsa. I'm like, I don't want to build a snowman. Like this. That song is so annoying. Just like I'm sort of like the bad example in the room, and it all works because they know that it's a game. They get that it's like. They get it's a character, they get it's a game, they get all that. So it's kind of like, it's closer to like sketch and improv than it is stand-up. I don't know, it's kind of hard to explain, but it works.
Do you have different pacing for kid shows as opposed to doing comedy for, when you're doing at the Magic?
The Mystery Lounge. Usually my style for my stand-up act is pretty low-key, pretty, more like I'm getting the thought that minute, kind of more distracted. And the kid show, boy, you have to just be like boom, 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 boom. It's like, I always say a good kid show is like a shark, it has to keep swimming or it dies, so you can't carefully put away props. I just like ditch and move on to the next trick. So it's just like, boom. It's just way more faster paced, not really high energy, but just a faster, you just have to keep it moving along and keep it.
You can't have too much setup time.
And you have to have a lot of like new starts. So it's like if they kind of zone out on something, you kind of get them back, which is the same for stand up. If you get to do a long bit and you're telling a long story, some people just zone out on it, but then you need to be able to get them back, the next thing. So I just, I'm more leisurely in my stand up and way more, fast pace.
When it comes to
my word count would be like probably triple.
Because you're constantly talking.
You're just constantly like, and most of the jokes are like word. Like I don't do a lot of physical comedy. It's mostly like word jokes. It's like mostly like stand up jokes. That
is there a
lot of callbacks, a lot of like running gags, callbacks. At the end, 3 callbacks all come together in the end. It's just like a perfect little Harold showing up at the end of the show. It's just like
Is there technical aspects that you've come across where you're like, I would love to be able to do this bit, but I need somebody to run sound or lights for it? Or there's a mechanical thing that I just can't carry around or whatever?
It's funny. I used to be more limited by that. Like any prop that had to make noise in the old days had a tape recorder and a speaker built into it. So like I literally had to rewind the tape and play it and hold it up to the mic, and it would make a sound, and that was like really like difficult. Now, I do educational programs in schools. I do like a science show, and I do an ecology show, and I do like a reading show, a couple of different reading shows, and they're all like educational, but really, joke. But it's, but it's like I bring in backdrops, banners, everything short of lights. I have to bring in my own sounds. I'm like, I have to set up the whole theater basically. Like it looks like a theater show, and I have to set it up every single show. So I run all my own sound cues. I have a thing. There's this little device. It's called an audio ape. It's like a little unit with an antenna that plugs in, and it goes between your sound system and your iPhone or your iPad. So basically, then there's a dedicated program on the iPad that has all my cues. So basically, I'm just like hitting with a remote button in my pocket, and I can change the order of stuff I can like with the remote, I can change the order, I can skip things, I can change the volume, I can kind of adapt on the fly. There's a new thing now that they just added to the program, which I haven't learned yet, but I I want to sit down and learn it, where I can play tracks that are out of order. Like I can have like emergency tracks. So it's like if a kid enters into the zone that they're not supposed to be, I can have like security alarms go off. It's kind of like, whenever I want, and then be right on track with the program. So it's really complicated. Like the shows are really complex, like one show maybe has 30 music cues or sound effects.
Wow.
In the show. And it's like, and I'm like on my science show, I do a thing where it's kinetic energy versus potential energy. So, I had this guy, a voiceover guy, do like a wrestling announcer, like in this corner we have potential energy, the stored energy of an stationary object. So it's kind of like, it's in these bells, the ring being the bells and the crowd noise and everything. So I'm producing like all this content and now like a new show I'm working on is going to have like video content. Like that's going to be like kind of a trip because I know nothing about that, but it's like, so this show I'm going to pay somebody to do it, but then kind of be around when they're doing it, so I can kind of learn it and kind of figure it out. But it'll have like video content that comes up. So then I have to bring a screen and a projector and all that stuff like that. But it's like
carry around a TV.
Yeah, but it's like so I'm showing up with the whole show every day. So it's
that's labor intensive.
Oh yeah. No,
it's much more labor. Yeah, for me, the most I do is bring a PA system and a mic stand.
Yeah,
and I'm done.
And but I'm like I have to bring everything. It's just like and you have to set up quick and you have to move it along quick and stuff. So it's like it's funny when I hit a school, it's like you get to the school, you go to the office, you sign in, somebody escorts you to the gym. I bring in my cart with all my stuff. I set up the show. It probably takes me about 20 minutes to set up the show. I do the show, pack it up, and then I'm out and I'm on to the next one. It's just like, but it's like, yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's a lot of, and working on the cues and learning the software and all that stuff like
and
that.
while also at the same time, reading up on what's going on with Magic Now, what technology out there, trying to stay ahead on what tricks are going around.
But I'm very lucky because it's like everything I do is related to comedy, or magic. So it's just sort of like, it's all,
where do you think you spend the most time as a performer? Promoting your show, researching your show, practicing your show, or doing bookkeeping?
Mostly bookkeeping. Yeah, that's like the biggest thing. Although I had a system for doing contracts and invoices and keeping track of everything that was really old, and the guy that made it was really good, but then he stopped supporting it. So basically it wouldn't run anymore on any of so I had like one really, really old lap book that it was like kind of working on occasionally. So I switched to a new one that's all like cloud-based, and I cut it. It's like 10% of the time it used to take. Like, if I had to do like 4 contracts, it would take me hours to do. It takes me 15 minutes now. So I'm like, so that freed up a lot of time. Like this new system, it's like, oh, this is great. This keeps track of everything. And it's just really, really easy to use. And I love it. So that a lot of times like technology comes along and kind of frees up a lot of energy, but most of it's the business booking it and, reminding people like, hey, I did the show last year. Do you want to do it again this year? That kind of thing. Keeping track of all that stuff. It's just sort of like, that's 90% of the work. And
that's where I'm at right now. Because last year I made more doing comedy acting and writing for the Dig than I did performing ever in my life. So
it's great.
Now I'm
good
at that tax schedule point where I'm like, why? Like, present me is really mad at past me for not keeping the receipts.
Oh, the receipts.
It's mostly been a hobby in the eyes of the IRS, so I haven't kept it. And now I'm doing the bookkeeping and I'm doing the invoice.
Yeah,
I had a couple corporate gigs this year that I had to do invoices for, that I had to figure out how to do an invoice for. And
I have an envelope right now full of 1099s from like every possible thing. And receipts are crazy because it's like you have to account for everything. I have this thing that it's a little labor intensive, but it works pretty well. It's called a neat scanner. And basically it will scan the receipt, and then you plug it in, and then you can like, oh, that was for this. And then you write down everything in the category.
It's very thin. It's like a little bar,
right?
And
it's that I really like a lot. And then that way you have a digital copy. It's all, you have everything. And
I did a couple freelance audio gigs over the past couple weeks, which is work I'm trying to find more of, because not having a day job, I'm actively not looking for a day job and trying to do as much as the performance, freelance, audio, radio stuff that I can, just so I can stay afloat. And I feel like getting laid off was a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, it usually is. I mean, you usually like,
this is my last chance. I'm not going to get much more opportunities to try it. So do it now while I can.
Yeah.
And I just started scanning using the scanner there to scan all my receipts. And I was like, why was I not doing this before?
Yeah. It's and what I like about that is if most of my stuff, or a lot of it, is like an email receipt. So then I can forward it to the program. So it just goes right in. So I don't even have to print it out. Like I don't have to print it out and scan. I just like forward it, and that receipt just goes right to there. Yeah. So it's like, it still takes a long time, but it's like, easier than it, or more organized than it used to be like a million years ago. But yeah.
What techniques? Because when you graduated from you didn't graduate from Emerson with a performance.
No, advertising and PR.
Okay, so that's obviously very beneficial to
yeah.
Is there particular techniques for comedians or performers in general about advertising themselves, promoting themselves that people they don't naturally figure out on their own? Is there something you would say, hey, look, if you want to do as a performer, you should be doing these for promotional techniques?
Yeah. Well, it's like I said earlier about how, I said, if you're a comedian, you just can't always wait for the joke to just pop into your head. You have to find it. You can't just wait for the phone to ring. You have to. I two things like in the span of a year, two things happened. One, a comedy booker that was local left the area, just like, going to New York, and basically half my income just dried up because they weren't booking these rooms any. It was just like gone overnight. And then within a year, I just had a weird falling out with the other half, and then the other half kind of went, or a good chunk of it went. And it was like, I will never, ever be in that position where I'm not in charge of my own bookings. Like I'm in charge of getting the shows. I'm in charge of finding the work. And it was horrible that it happened, but it like, again, it's like a blessing in disguise, because it made me really take the business side of it seriously and make everything work. So, most of my shows are like, I have to bring in, because a lot of it's like with kids, and families, like that person ages out of that thing. So if they're the PTO mom, they age out of it. Like the kids move on to high school, and they're not your contact at the school anymore. So it's kind of like, I have to bring in so many new people a year to keep, like, most of my work is repeat stuff. People that see me and know me, in schools that have me, and I've done it. So most of it's like repeat, like about 80% of it is like repeat. So that 20% is I have to bring in 20% new people every year. So then it's like, so I'm in charge of finding those people, like through like either like Facebook ads or things like that, or even just like, I kind of look at every show as like an infomercial for the show, so that they know, like when they see the show, they know that they can hire me. Like they know that I do different things. Like a lot of times they see you do the magic show and they don't realize, like, I do a science show, I do this. So you have to find ways to kind of make sure that they know that you do all this different stuff. But it's, I think a lot of comedians just sort of wait, and wait for the phone to ring. And it's just like, no, you have to go out and do this. You have to, like you should never be in that position, just like waiting for the phone to call you.
In your experience, when you contact somebody for the first time about booking, is it an email? Is it a phone call? Do you do a mix?
I don't like cold calling people. I don't like, hey, hi, how are you? So I can't do that.
Okay.
Like, I find that really difficult. So usually it's like a mailing, like I'll mail out like a postcard or something, and I'll do mailings kind of timed throughout the year, for different things. So and then then they'll call, and that does a pretty good job of it. Advertising places, having it like Google ads, or having like your website come out a little bit higher than everybody else's, like that kind of thing. But that's like every month you're kind of paying for that kind of stuff. So it's sort of it's kind of, I'm not the best at it. I have a lot of friends who are, so I'm usually like, will you look at my stuff and just tell me if I'm doing it right? And I'll call you again next year. Okay, great. I won't bother you too much, So I'm not great at that, but I think I'm good enough at it that it seems to be working out pretty well. And that's that kind of stuff changes all the time. So you have to kind of always be up on it, but you can pay people to do it. I mean, but I try to do everything myself, which is probably not.
Which
yeah.
I always, my anxiety, the only real anxiety I get is sending out feelers for shows.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if I'm supposed to be like, casually like, hey, I'm a comedian. Here's where you can see my stuff. I'd love to play at your place or whatever.
Yeah.
Even when I message people I know personally about, hey, you got a room. Hey, Chris, it's Dennis. Let me know if there's any chance that I can come up and like, I'm trying to be very casual, but to the point with them.
Yeah.
But then when it's someone I don't know, I try to be very business and like, hello, sir, madam. I am a comedian that would love to perform at your establishment. Here is where you can preview my material.
Your humble servant.
Humble servant. Like, thank you, and I look forward to doing business with you in the future.
Yeah. Corporate stuff is kind of like that, and I do some corporate stuff. I don't like it as much. I'm more like, I like things like I do Google's like take your kids to work day, and I just do like shows all day. It's just like, that's great. That's easy. That's corporate, but it's like, it's easy. I don't like.
Bring your kids to work and then just do the kids.
Yeah, I'm just doing the show. Like they have a show for the kids, and I do the shows, and that's it.
Perfect.
It's, I don't like the corporate thing where you can't be funny. You can't, you know what I mean? Like you kind of, you realize somebody's going to get fired if you don't do a good job.
Yeah.
I don't like that responsibility. I don't like, that person that booked you just wringing their hands the whole time that it's going to be okay. Like, I just find that really kind of tiring. Like, I don't like the pressure of that, so, but I do them, but I don't do a lot of
Brian
it.
Longwell can go do those.
Yeah, Brian does a great.
I love his corporate bit.
Amazing.
I thought when I heard about it, when I moved here, when I saw it, because I used to run the website that listed all the shows, and his name would pop up at the studio, and I would look up to see who he was, and I'm like, that's kind of lame. Then I saw it, I was like, it's brilliant.
He's brilliant.
It's great, like the projector, the slide, the little transparency,
and that's like,
and it's such a great idea, and
it's such a you carve out your little niche, and you can do it. Like, who used to do that? People were called put-on artists. It's like Pat Paulson was a put-on. He would just like be a fake expert on something and come in, and you see these guys do it, and they're amazing at it, but like no one even knows it exists because it's kind of like they're just kind of under the radar. But somebody like Brian, he's great. He does it in the club, and it's brilliant.
It works in the club, and I can only imagine how well it works actually at a corporate event.
Yeah, especially when they're
seriously made for that environment.
Yeah, they're buying that it's real, and he's like, these slides are horrible, and it's like, it looks like a 2-year-old. It's great. Yeah, it's
just
brilliant.
Brilliantly dry.
It's brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. Well, all right. So let's go back to Emerson, and I think we'll wrap up with that. Is when you're part of the committee that created this comedy course.
Yeah.
What things did you and the rest of them have to specifically look at to go, look, if we're going to do a serious job of teaching comedy, what are the aspects that we need all these students to know in the 4 years before they walk out the door?
it's that they can do a lot with comedy. That it's not just sitcoms or that it's basically it's integrated into all of Emerson. So it's like there's studies programs, so you could become like a historian or write books on you could become an expert and write books on comedy, that kind of thing. There's film and screenplay and playwriting and so it's kind of like everything that's at Emerson now. There's like a comedy angle, which there always was, but it's sort of like they can get credit for it, so it's making sure that it's a well-rounded program with a lot of people can take a lot of different paths. I teach the intro class, the major, which is kind of like a little bit of everything, like a little comedy primer thing, just kind of make sure everybody's on the same page roughly with language and terminology that they're going to use later on. A lot of people haven't really written before, like they haven't written sketches, so we write sketches. They do a little bit of stand-up to try their, hand at it. They look at kind of little historical things, little trends. We talk about industry issues as they come up. Like, so if there's some big controversy, we're like all over it, like talking about it and, talking it through and looking for patterns. So it's like, yeah, it's sort of like a little comedy 101 kind of a thing that kind of gets them all going there. And it's I really like doing that. It's a lot of fun.
Do you put any effort into having like guest lecturers, or when there's somebody who's particularly hot in town, like if Pete Davidson was at the Wilbur, do you guys reach out to somebody that's like, hey, would you like to come by the class and talk to them?
It's funny. That's something that I have been wanting to do, because the Wilbur's right there.
Yeah.
I mean, like literally, like it's
most
just right
of them are
around the corner from my
yeah.
class, and they're right across the street. Like you could walk a block and you're in my classroom. So a lot of that is the school having to have the access, so it's kind of gets a little complicated. But I have had people come in as guests. Like I remember I had Joe Wong come in like right after he did the Letterman set for the first time. And do you know Joe?
Yeah.
He's genius.
I
Brilliant.
want to say he's actually he's Asian, but I think specifically
he's Chinese, and he
studied here for a bunch of years and then went back and started a whole.
And now he's
Chinese
like
comedy.
the Jon Stewart of China
Yeah.
now, like basically like a celebrity.
Yeah, I met him once or twice.
But he was like working at the studio doing stuff. Got Letterman, and Letterman like loved him, and they were trying to develop a show for him. So I just kind of talked about like his experience getting that, and also it was kind of interesting because I don't know how you keep the comedy of two languages in your head. I just have nothing but praise for you if you can do that. I can barely do it with one.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just like to be able to go back and forth between the two is just like kind of amazing. So yeah, I'll have people come in. I want to try to do more of that, bringing people in. It mostly I don't do it because it's just a hassle. You have to clear them with the school, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot of paperwork and a lot of time. So a lot of times, like I thought, like I know he was just Amazing Jonathan, you mentioned earlier, was just the Wilbur. I know him. I thought, hey, I'll have him come in, but it's just like it would have taken I would have had to known like a month in advance and done paperwork. It's just like it's very complicated. So if we could make it easier, it'd be nice.
I want to talk to him badly because I want to know what happened, because he was on death's doorstep.
Yeah,
and now he's back and 100%. I mean, I heard him talk about it, but I want to.
He was supposed to be dead. He was like, "Yep, I have a couple of weeks left. That's kind of it."
And even on Maron, like after he announced it on Mark Maron's podcast, there was still a lot of, is this still a bit? Is this still a joke?
It's not a bit.
It wasn't, no.
Yeah, he's definitely, but he...
you couldn't tell at first, like, is he doing a bit or is he serious? And because the way he piled it on, where it's like, look, I'm doing 2 shows, and by the time this comes out, I've already done those shows, and I may not be here by the time the show...
that's what it was like. That's what it was like.
You
but now...
with Jonathan's comedy,
they actually, at Sundance, they just premiered one of 2 documentaries about him that were filming at the same time, which is really weird. And I guess it's great. And I guess HBO bought it, or somebody, Hulu or somebody bought it. So it'll be like on, like probably the next year or so.
I'm jealous
but,
that she saw it already, and I'm like, I
I
have to
didn't
see
get to
what
see
is.
it, but yeah.
Well, she's at Sundance right now.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, I'm only here for the second half of the week. I'm like, you're still at Sundance. Stop playing this down.
Yeah. But no, he has beat all the odds, and he's, last time I saw him was maybe a year ago, and he he's ill, but he's there, still doing stuff, still, like, came up with a joke for him. I was like, all right, great, okay.
Do you press to your students about going out and seeing shows as like homework?
Yeah, that's another thing. I would love to get a relationship with the Wilbur to get like internships or things like that over there. That'd be great. But yeah, I try to get them. There's so much comedy on campus. It's very easy to get sucked into just like being there.
That's what I hear about
and it's
Emerson
like,
students.
No, you gotta.
They'll perform for 4 years just inside there.
Yeah, no, and it's like that's why I take the shows out of Emerson. I make them do their stand up in the Comedy Studio or Improv Boston. Same thing with the sketch. I make them do it in the room, and it's like, nope, we're actually doing it in a real room, and you're responsible for getting people to go there, and like getting an audience and all that. So, I want it to be a real experience. I don't want it to be like just their friends and all that. It's funny. I was always, when I started, I never let people come see me. I was like friends, and I hated if somebody I knew was in the audience. Like I liked just going up and not knowing anybody, and it's like I don't think I'd do it if I had. That's why like the whole bringer show thing is so horrendous, because it's like I probably wouldn't have done it if I had to bring friends every single time I performed. I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, there's my experience with bringer shows was a necessary evil / like, to me, I want to put, Magoobies was my first bringer in Baltimore.
Right.
And
Boston still hasn't really done it very much.
Yeah, but
it's
the people who do it don't.
But everywhere else, it's kind of, and now I think it's like people are actually paying to go on stage plays. That's what I've heard. Like, you're actually like, if you want to go on stage, it costs this much. It's like, that's not a good thing.
And
that's not how it works.
I commend the people that want to perform that badly, that they're willing to do that.
But that's not how it works.
That is not. It's going to get you nowhere.
No, it's going to get you nowhere. It's like
that's what you have to get through their heads.
Yeah, you're better off staying home and watching the Marx Brothers, and picking up something funny from them. It's like, I don't know. When I started it, I was just so lucky. There were so many open mics and just so many venues, and the more you do, you get better faster. It's just like, that's kind of how it is, And also like if I had like 10 open mic nights in a week, which was not unusual, if I was kind of hot on a joke and it didn't work the first time, I'd still be hot on it and I'd try it the next one. But if you had like a month in between, you're gonna go, yeah, I don't think that joke's very funny. Yeah. I don't either. So you kind of don't even. Nothing has legs in your, you just, I don't know. I think it's very difficult.
What do you, for the stand-up portion of your classes, for the people who are specifically stand-ups, what's the benefit to going through the process at Emerson that, as opposed to just going to open mics at 18, 19 years old and going through that process? Do you feel that the students they're going to learn something specific in those 4 years than just 4 years of open mics?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually, because
thank you. I pride myself on good questions.
they should be going out and doing spots, but a lot of times it's the stand-up class I get. It's mostly people that have never done it before. There might be one or two that, like, I think right now in my class it's like 15 people, maybe 4 have done it a few times. Not like on campus, not really like out there. So they're all pretty new at it. So I think they wouldn't do it otherwise. I think they need the workshop environment to get it. Because then it's kind of like, okay, now I want to do these jokes. Now I want to do it. And I think it just puts you a little bit ahead of the game in terms of just going up cold in an open mic, because again, we spend a lot of time crashing in and coming up with the tags, and a lot of times like a tag might take a year or 2 years to get, and it's kind of like I think we get it a little bit faster, so I think you just kind of get there a little bit quicker with it.
You get the students in more of a writing mindset then.
Yeah, and they're constantly have to think about what they do. I can usually anticipate problems. I can usually anticipate. That's a little long. That setup's too clumsy. I can usually kind of anticipate that and kind of help them clean up a lot of the rough edges before they even go on. So I think when they go on, they're in a little bit better place, and they do better than if you just went up a few times without putting a lot of thought into it, I think. So
where do you feel is the difference?
And I think you also develop good habits, like to continue it. I think, everything I teach them is like to be that you have to work. This isn't easy. You have to work on this. This is hard. You have to write. You have to do this. You have to. So I think I instill kind of good work ethic in them, and I think that carries them through.
Have you ever looked at the difference between what your curriculum teaches and what a by the way, do we have a hard out on time?
No, I'm good. Yeah.
Between what your curriculum teaches and then somewhere like IB or independent comedy writing, comedy classes, do you see what those guys are doing and see if it's?
I don't. It's funny. I kind of actually purposely kind of don't look at that because I kind of have my thing that I know works, and I kind of, just. Yeah, I just kind of make. I wrote a book called The Everything Guide to Comedy Writing.
I had a note on here about books.
Yeah. So I wrote that, and actually, I know Comedy Sports was using it, and in Austin, there's like a long-running sketch show called Esther's Follies. It's like kind of and they use it in their classes in there. So other people are using it. And it's more a book about creativity than it is anything else. It's just like, again, like how to come up with ideas and that kind of thing. So, so I kind of just stick to my own little thing and kind of, change it as I see the industry changing, but yeah.
The process, can you go over the process of creating a book? Because you have 2 or 3 books out, don't you?
That's like the only proper book, like book. I've done a lot of, I wrote for Magic Magazine, which was the biggest magic magazine in the world. I wrote like 50 columns for that.
Oh, wow.
So that's going to be a book, and it's like some of the things are, here's how you do a trick, here's a thing. Most of it was like kind of essays and stuff about comedy and things like that. So I'm kind of, it's going to be like a 2-part book, theory and then practice, kind of like that kind of thing. So,
when's that book going to be out?
It's basically when I wrote it, it was like, I'm going to write a chapter at a time. Like I had the picture of the bigger picture in mind. So I just have to edit it, re-edit it and kind of put it all together. So whenever I free up time, which will probably never happen. But I've thought about writing a book about sketch comedy because it's like there's not really a lot out there on it, and I've done it for a long time. Like probably 25 years at Emerson. I've done thousands and thousands of sketches, so it's like I think I have a pretty good grasp on it. Like we can in class fix SNL sketches in 5 minutes. We'll show them a sketch. It's like, just talk it out. Here's a great ending for it. Boom, 5 minutes. It's like, we can knock it out pretty well. So, so I might, thinking about writing that. I've written like lecture notes and things like that, but yeah, not that this is like the only book. The way I got the book was, I had written a column, my first column for Magic Magazine, which was called 5 Steps to Funny. It was like, here's 5 little techniques you can use to put comedy in your act. It's just like kind of like a little thing. And I got a call from the publisher saying, we're looking for somebody to write a book on comedy writing, and we understand that you teach at Emerson and all this. And they said, do you have anything that you've written that you could give us an example? And I had just written this. So I sent it. And then I had the contract like that afternoon. It was like to write it. So then I had a deadline. Mm-hmm. So it's just like, it was like, I had like a few months to do it. And it was just like the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm happy with how it came out, but it was like, I would have liked to have had more time with it. but I probably wouldn't have ever got it done unless I had a deadline and had to do it and stuff. But yeah, I
Is
like
that
it.
what something like? I mean, not that you're getting older in age. Is there a point that you have considered when you're going to start pulling back from performing? Is that even a thought of what will I do if I stop performing? Or if
I don't. It's not on the. I don't plan to stop. It's sort of like I don't.
I'm not suggesting you should. I just
It's sort of like
future.
No, I mean I don't really have I don't see myself ever not performing. I like doing it. It's like that's kind of what I do. Yeah, I mean I might end up teaching more and going back or writing book. I might but I don't see I'm gonna go. Yep, I'm not doing this anymore. It's like no, I'd go crazy in a week if I didn't get to do it.
Yeah, I think about the labor intensity of this. I feel like at some point, some people would go, look, I like performing, but I don't like doing everything else involved with it. So I'll make the balance and give up on one.
Yeah, other people hire people to set up the bring in the show. Like Jonathan, back to him, he like when he was doing, was he at the Flamingo? Where was he in Vegas? His like big room. He, somebody else set up the whole show. He just like walked in and did it and left and they packed it up and, so it's sort of like, I could see doing that, hiring someone to like, like
a stagehand.
they come in, they set up the show. I just do it. And yeah, I could see that, but yeah. So,
excellent.
Yeah.
And the final question I'll ask you,
which seems very like indulgent. It's just like I'm not. I feel bad if like I don't complain about if the waiter brings me I don't complain.
Yeah.
Like I don't. I feel like that would be very weird, but it would be practical to do that.
And the final question I will ask you is a question I ask all comedians. And I think you've already answered it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you feel you're more of a writer or a performer? Like, can you curate jokes and comedy for other people? Or do you write and it works with you and you're better on stage than you are on paper or something along those lines?
I'm way better on paper, I think, than I am on stage. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love writing with other people. That's like, never really written, I guess, I'll punch up. I'll go, hey, what about this joke? I'll add little things to a script, like in class, but I don't really ever take it over or anything. It's just I like collaboration. I like working with other people. I like making stuff funnier. I always feel like you can always I always feel like nothing's ever done. You can always make it funnier. I even like look at performing as just another part of writing because it's kind of like, oh, okay, then I add this to it, and that's writing. It's sort of like it's the untested. It's part of the process. I have to go on stage and do it, and then I can add to it. But nothing's better than like a joke that's 20 years old and you add something new to it. It's just like, oh, it's great. That's like the best feeling in the world. It's like even more so than coming up with a new joke for me. It's just like, no, here's this joke that's been sitting there. I'm doing it for this way, and I just get this one little distinction that makes it 1,000 times better. It's just like, yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
I would have figured you were going to say performer. Because...
No. I was. I mean, like, I always considered myself as like a reluctant performer. Like it was again like I liked the magic stuff. I forced myself to do it. Same thing with the comedy. It was like, where am I going to do? Like, I'm doing magic. I'm not David Copperfield. I'm a goofy looking guy. I have to go in and like, so comedy's probably so I always feel like I kind of fell into everything and it worked out well, but it was never like, I don't think I ever it was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. I don't know. It's kind of complicated.
You like the creation of it, which
I like the creations. Like that's what I love about teaching.
I love the performance side of it.
Yeah.
I've always identified more as a performer, whereas I will create my own jokes. But I think if somebody gave me a joke, I can do that joke just as well or better performing it than it would ever be on paper by itself, personally.
Yeah.
Because I just like the performance. Like, even my writing process is, I do a lot of, I'll go up with a premise and I'll talk it out and use the fight or fight.
Exactly. It's funny. I talk about this in class all the time. It's just like usually, like if I'm going on with something new, like I'm working on this thing. So I've been trying to I gained a lot of weight. I've been trying to lose weight and getting on the vitamins, supplements. I've been taking like fiber, gummy fiber, and gummy vitamin C and gummy multivitamins. My doctor just prescribed gummy insulin. So it's sort of like, I roughly know the joke. It's like because of the gummy, I have all the gummy stuff I have to take.
Insulin.
Gummy insulin because I'm just eating sugar all day long. And I roughly know the joke, but I don't know if like I'm doing the mystery lounge tonight. I'm going to do it. I don't know what I'm going to say. I let all that happen on stage. I kind of work out the thing in my head. Like I know the A, B, and C, but I'm happy to see how it comes out. Like I can't commit to it yet on paper.
Yeah, I have to talk a joke out.
Yeah.
And then sit down with it and review it. And occasionally there will be a few things structure-wise or new things I'll add to it. Then I have to try it again.
Yeah.
And I have to...
That's how I am.
Problem.
Yeah.
I can't... the people who can just sit down, write something...
Yeah, I'm not...
and memorize it verbatim.
I
such
can't.
An impossible concept to me.
I like... Just like you said, the fight or flight. That seems to work for me. I like, forcing... it's funny. I always like... If I write it out first... as opposed to doing it. When I do it, I always come up with some weird, awkward phrasing that works so much better that I can't write. But it just comes out, and it's like, oh yeah, that I kind of stumbled through it, and that stumbling is like kind of what I do. So it's sort of like, okay, I can't write that. I just have to let it kind of happen.
Cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm glad we were able to finally sit down and have this conversation after a lot of back and forth.
Yeah.
There's certain times where I was like, I'll email him tomorrow, and then tomorrow becomes a week, and a week becomes 2 weeks. And
Yeah. No, I
weeks.
apologize because
you're a busy guy who's got a lot going on. There's nothing wrong with you. Sometimes I need to be better at following up on things.
Yeah. But I had a great time. I'm so happy I could do it.
Well, I'm glad we did this.
Yeah, thanks.